questions. So please put them. Hey everyone, how are you doing? I'm so happy that you're with us this afternoon. We are excited to be online with all of you. Last week, we launched Amplify Action, and hundreds of you joined us as we had conversations with great folks like Jamie Harrison, the Democratic nominee for the United States Senate from South Carolina, and Congressman G.K. Butterfield of North Carolina to learn more about Amplify Action's mission. It has been our extreme privilege and pleasure to have been able to sit down with these amazing men to share our mission with you. And at the end of this broadcast, you want to stay to the end because we have a very, very special announcement. You don't want to miss it. I promise you, you're going to be just excited as we are when you find out who's joining us tomorrow. So, again, my name is Brandon Upson. I serve as the executive director for Amplify Action. We launched Amplify Action to reach Black men all across the Southeast, specifically in South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama. Also, this afternoon, we welcome your questions as always. So please put them in the comments and in the chat. And I promise you, we'll get to as many of them as possible because I know that you want to hear from the amazing people that we have joining us. Next, you will hear from Mr. Rashad Gaines, the one and only. He serves as our Chief Strategy Officer, and he has a special introduction that he's going to give. Rashad, you have the floor. Good seeing you, brother.
Good to see you too, bro. Thank you for that warm introduction, Brandon. Again, my name is Rashad Frazier Gaines. I bring you greetings from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. But before I moved to Washington, D.C. just 3 years ago, I was and still am and will always be a small town country boy from the little city of Aiken, South Carolina. And it was there that I began to understand how the world works for people and how I didn't want it to work for me. And that's how I got involved in this work. It was shortly after attending the University of South Carolina that I took a job managing a restaurant in Birmingham, Alabama. And I remember getting on I-20 one Sunday afternoon. It was the weekend that Michael Jackson died. I won't forget that. And I remember getting in my 1993 Cadillac Eldorado and driving up I-20 west and going into Alabama. And I remember as the sun was coming down, as I was driving through the Talladega National Forest and coming out of the forest, and you see all of the mountains, and I was like, wow, Alabama really is beautiful. And then the first license plate I saw said Alabama the Beautiful. It's a very beautiful city, beautiful state, many beautiful cities, a lot of really great people. And unfortunately, when people think of Alabama, they don't think about its beauty. They don't think about its natural resources. They think about the horrific past that our country has had in dealing with race relations. And I'm so excited that my dear friend and brother was elected as mayor of Montgomery, Alabama. Today, our guest is going to be Mayor Stephen Reed. He is the son of Joseph L. Reed, a civil rights activist and accomplished public servant and leader. Mayor Reed was Montgomery County's first African American and youngest elected probate judge. As probate judge, he has expanded access to representation, improved facilities, and modernized the office to cultivate strategic partnerships to meet the needs of the community. Just 50 years after his father's involvement in the movement towards desegregation, Mayor Reed was sworn in as the first African American mayor of Montgomery, Alabama in 2019, just last year. I can't believe that we are in the 21st century and we're still dealing with so many firsts. But I'm glad that young brothers like Stephen Reed are helping us change not just the face of this country, but the narrative of America. Stephen is, again, the first African American mayor in the 200 years of Montgomery's operations. So, Mayor Reed, I'm grateful that you are here with us on today to discuss your work and your leadership in Montgomery, as well as why local election matters. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, as we work to fix the mayor's audio, I wanted to share just a couple of things with you. Again, thank you, Rashad, for that amazing introduction of the mayor, who is a pioneer and has such a legacy of loyalty to the people of Alabama and throughout the country. Honestly, the fights that we are facing, even in this time right now, and I share this all the time, you know, there are different pathways to get to the solutions that we seek. We're marching in the streets, bringing awareness to the issues. We also have to be registering and educating our community so that we can amplify our voices, which are heard loudest through our votes. We also have to make sure we're electing allies like Mayor Reed, who can go into office and bring forth the legislation, the ordinance, and the policies that we have to bring to the forefront in order to change the system as a whole. I'm always talking about the difference between reform and transformation. Think about it this way, like a ball of clay. If you have a ball of clay and you change the shape of that ball of clay to whatever you want to, you've reformed that clay into a different shape. But at the end of the day, the substance is still the same. In the system that we are working to undo and to change for the better, it requires transformation. That means changing the substance of that system so that it now works for everyone. We're always looking to educate our allies, our Caucasian brothers and sisters, who allow us to come through the door in many cases that we don't have access to. Our dear brother Jamar Brown always says, "We don't need folks to come in on a white horse to save us. We need you to roll up your sleeves and be accomplices with us. Work your network, go into those boardrooms and change the conversation so that everyone is considered when these policies are made." This is the big reason why we've had the folks on here that we've had, starting with Jamie Harrison, who's running for the United States Senate. When we change who represents us at one of the highest levels of government, we will start seeing some of these policies change. When we talk about access to the ballot, that is a huge, huge fight that has been waged for decades now, but we're finally starting to see some movement. When we have congressmen like G.K. Butterfield come on and join us, who has been a steward for change and policy reform for decades, he gives a different viewpoint of the policies that we can make happen. But when we talk about the immediate changes that we feel overnight, you can't get more personal and more grassroots than a city's mayor. The mayor can implement policies that can literally change our lives overnight. So having Mayor Reed on here sharing what he's done in his city, what he sees as important, what his life's experiences have brought him to. I wanted to make sure we all had as many people on here as possible so that you can get that amazing information. Now in the time of COVID, we can't come together, but we've been connected more than ever through these digital and social media platforms. So we're bringing this directly to you. So if you can, while we have this time, while we're fixing the mayor's audio, please share this live stream, invite people to join, start your own watch party of this if you're on Facebook, retweet it if you're on Twitter, and we can get this going. I see Brother Gaines, you're going to join me here. Rashad has been doing this work across the country for so many years. To be a young brother the way he as young as he is, you would think he was double his age and the amount of work and experience that he has. You want to add something to the conversation, Rashad?
Yeah, Brandon, it's funny to me because I was listening to you last week, and when you gave a shout out to our neighborhood back at home, and I just think Bakari Sellers. I remember when I was an undergrad, Bakari was in law school at USC, and every time he started a speech, he started and ended the speech with "We stand on the shoulders of giants," and I just think about all of the old heads in our neighborhood who would be smiling right now, and I'm sure they're smiling down from heaven, looking at us. And I'm pretty sure they'll say, "I always knew he was going to turn out good," but that's probably not what they was thinking when we were at the park fighting and tearing stuff up.
We said at the same time, yes.
And and trying to get $1 so we could get a pickled pig feet at Edmonds.
The corner store, or a good old pickled egg.
Don't play about the pickled eggs now. But no, I appreciate the shout out. I'm just glad that we get to do this work together. But the reality is, we do this work for the generation that's coming after us. Your children, my god babies, our nieces and nephews. We do this work for them because we're in our 30s. Which isn't old, Dylan and Casper. 30 is not old, but the reality is we have to do this work to make life easier for the ones that are coming after us. The reality is doing movement work, first of all, there's no retirement plan, right? So we're doing this work and working jobs so that we can take care of our family. The other piece of it is this: doing work that impacts people's lives is often thankless and not always rewarded. And I challenge young people. It's only been recently that people who are literally putting their lives at risk or making these sacrifices have gotten opportunities to be painted in a good light in the media. I know America loves the great Dr. Martin Luther King now, but the media didn't speak highly of him when he lived. The books speak very, very kindly of the Malcolm X now, but they didn't speak kindly of him during the time that he walked this earth. And I think that we just have to be mindful about that, and we have to stay focused on the work. We don't do this work to get likes on Facebook. We don't do this work to get opportunities to be on mainstream news outlets. We do this work because it impacts the people who look like us, and it impacts our families, and it impacts the families of our friends and our neighbors and the kids we grew up and went to school with and their children. In our hometown recently, there were 2 murders. And let me set the record straight in this platform, right? When we say Black Lives Matter, we mean that on a completely different level. Our quest to save Black lives isn't only from the deaths at the hands of officers who are paid to protect us. It's to save Black lives, period. That means Black babies' lives, Black teachers' lives, Black LGBT people's lives, the lives of Black churches. We want to stop gun violence. We want to stop gang violence. Like, we want to protect the entirety of the Black community. And I think that is where we are. So right now, we're going to bring on Mayor Reed.
Yeah, we got him.
Let's hope this works a little better.
Okay, we hear you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry about the technical difficulties.
No, it's okay. It's okay. If anybody can have technical difficulties, it is you, sir. So Brandon and I are going to get out of the way to let you give your spiel. But Mayor Reed is joining us today to talk about why local elections matter and to tell us a little bit more about him and his historic office that he's in right now, serving as mayor, the first African-American mayor. Are you also the youngest mayor of Montgomery?
You know what? Youngest in recent history. We haven't looked that up, but youngest in recent history, that's for sure.
We'll take it. We'll take it. Thank you, sir. I'm going to let you take the floor.
Thank you. Well, listen, first of all, again, I want to apologize for the technical difficulties. The good thing about being mayor is you normally have more than one computer that you can log in from. So we switched out of my office into the conference room, and that's where we are right now. But I just want to thank you all for the invitation and thank you for the work that you're doing. It's very important that we have organizations like yours and voices like yours to really push the envelope on a number of issues that need to be discussed. And one of the things that I think is so important, and I think why we wanted to have this conversation today, is because local elections really count. Local elections have a tremendous impact, and we talk so much about registering to vote, usually around the presidential election, but we don't always think about it in terms of local elections. And as someone who was elected in 2012 on the coattails of President Obama's general election ticket at the local level, I can tell you it makes a big impact. I won 51% to 49%. I was outspent 4-1 in my first run for office as countywide probate judge, which is the highest elected administrative position in the counties in Alabama. And when you think about that, it's something that often can be overlooked as we're focusing on the politics that get the attention, that get the press. But it's been said before, the government closest to you is usually the government that impacts you the most. And so when we think about where we are right now, overall in this climate, think about the local politics. Think about what our involvement has been. Think about the changes we want to see. And do we really have people in place to bring those changes about? As you all mentioned in your introduction of me, I grew up in a political family. I've been very blessed not only to grow up around many of the civil rights luminaries who come back here for various events and anniversaries, to be able to interact with them, but also to grow up in the house of one who started as a college student, integrating the lunch counters here in Montgomery, Alabama, and that's my father. And when I think about Joe Reed and what he did at Alabama State University, you think about the gentlemen that have come out there, such as Reverend Ralph David Abernathy and many others. You think about the bus boycott, Fred Gray, attorney for Martin Luther King Jr. at that time, as well as Mrs. Rosa Parks, all ASU alums. Those were people that believed in pressing forward, even at a young age, to challenge the system. And I think it's because of that, along with my matriculation at Morehouse College, that I began to understand a lot more about the power of politics. And it's very important that we understand that at a macro level and at a micro level, because while we think about things in terms of the history, we don't always hear how things were in the present. And I guess from my standpoint, I was able to hear some of those stories of men and women who were in college, in their early 20s, in their mid 20s, who took those stands to really make America live up to her ideals. And one of the things I think that I can take away from the protests that we've seen in recent weeks is that, again, we're seeing young people push that envelope. We're even seeing, multiracial, multicultural level of protest here that I don't know that we've seen in a number of decades. And so it's important that I think we understand the power of protest and what type of political and social change can come out of that. But also we have to understand, what do we want to get from it? What's our agenda? What is it that we really want to have an impact on? And when we consider voting overall, we ought to be thinking about what's happening right here locally. What's happening in my community, in my city, my county, in my state, and building out from there. Because those are things, whether it's a sheriff's race, a judge's race, or it's a DA's race, even down the school board. Those are things that are going to really have a tremendous impact. And I decided to run really out of frustration. I didn't move back to Montgomery. First of all, I never thought I'd move back to Montgomery after growing up here. I lived in Atlanta, Dallas, and Nashville, so I had no plans for coming back. But when I did come back, I was challenged because I was trying to do things behind the scenes. I was trying to do things through organizations, and I just couldn't seem to get the movement that I thought we should get as fast as we should get. And it wasn't until a friend of mine that I was trying to get to run himself challenged me to run, since I thought it was so important. And that's, essentially when I really made the decision. I've been, certainly inspired by President Obama's election, but I really made the decision after many of the people that I thought would be good in office, decided not to enter into politics for a number of reasons. And then when I was challenged myself. And so I believe that voting is so important because it's one of those things that really can chart the outcome for many of us in our communities at so many levels, because so much is happening at the local, state, and federal level. Things that impact not only our education, our access to healthcare, our access to financial capital, our prisons, the prison industrial complex, as we now speak of it. Many of these things are decided based on who's making the decision. And what we want, I believe, is more participation from Black men. If we're honest, we look back over the last 20, 30 years, the women have been carrying us. They've been carrying us, and we've been riding their backs in these elections. We saw it in the most recent U.S. Senate election here in Alabama with Doug Jones, overwhelmingly carried Doug Jones to a narrow victory in his special election for the United States Senate. We saw it with President Clinton in 2016, and we saw it prior to that even in 2012 and 08 with President Obama. So when we think about things that are impacting us in our communities, often they're happening right underneath our nose, and not happening in DC like we read about. Often they're happening in our city council meetings, in our county commission meetings, in our school board meetings, and in our state legislatures. So we want to keep those things in mind, and dare I forget, certainly our courthouses. So we want to keep those things in mind when we think about why we should participate and what's at stake. Because I think if Black men will be more involved and will be more energized, despite any candidate's imperfections. No, there is no perfect candidate. I'm not a perfect candidate. That one doesn't exist. But the question has to be, what can I gain by getting involved? And I think when we consider not only the sacrifices of generations before, but when we think about what we have to gain in the future, it is in our best interest that everyone who can vote not only register, because often people will register and still not vote. And I like to say it's not a voter registration problem that we have in Montgomery or in Alabama or in anywhere else. It's a voter participation problem. You can't give up because things don't go perfect. You can't take yourself out of the game because someone says 2 or 3 things that you don't like, or you may have a couple of positions that you disagree with. Challenge them, hold them accountable, but by all means, be involved and participate in this game called politics, because if not, it will be dictated to us versus us dictating the terms to them. So we need all the participation we can get at various levels. And again, even this year, you'll hear a lot about the presidential election, a lot about the Senate and congressional races. Make sure you invest in your local races. Make sure you invest some time in some of those candidates, and make sure you have an agenda as to what you expect and what you would like to see. And I think if we can do some of those things, then we can begin to make even more progress bit by bit, whether you're in South Carolina, if you're in Alabama, whether you're in Michigan, whether you're in Colorado. Those are things we have to do, I think, to make our union more perfect. And it's going to take all of us to really maximize our potential in that to really make it so. Having said that, I'll stop and press pause. And if you all have any questions, I'll be more than willing to take them. If you want to kind of direct the conversation toward a different lane, I'll be more than willing to jump with you in that.
Hey, thank you so much, Mayor Reed. Like everything that you said with your words is timely and exactly what we need folks to hear. I was trying to share that, but couldn't put it as eloquently as you did at how intimate your local elections and your local representatives, how intimate their role in your life is. It determines where resources go and how quickly you have access to them, right? But I wanted to go back just a second and just get your feedback on, you being the first elected Black mayor of Montgomery, Alabama. How did it feel when you won? Can you share that with us?
I think when we won, it was a feeling of relief. We had been on the trail for, probably about 11 months. And, it was something that we were very proud of the work that we had done. We felt we had put in everything that we could into the election, from, knocking on doors to holding town halls to speaking at various neighborhood associations. So there's a lot of work that goes into campaigns that most people don't see, and I get that. So I think the biggest feeling I had was one of relief, and then I think the feeling was one of satisfaction and one of humility of people that were older than I am, who grew up in Montgomery or grew up in other parts of Alabama, and even the South for that matter, who understood what Montgomery symbolized. To see that and to hear from people that night for days and weeks to come, it was just a sense of satisfaction and sense of humility to understand and to see letters and emails come in, Facebook messages, everything from people who were so excited because of the progress that had been made. And I often, have said that it should not have taken 200 years for Montgomery to have a Black mayor. I don't think I was the smartest or the best person who could have done this over the years. It happened at the right time, and the people of this community got behind our campaign, put a lot of energy, a lot of sweat equity in it, and they propelled us to a decisive win. And I think that decisive win really has played a role in the overall feeling of Montgomery and our drive and desire, I guess, to be a part of the New South and to be a part of a new generation of cities that are crafting different narratives than those before. And that's really what it comes down to for me, is to make sure I take the responsibility serious for the people who voted for me and the people who are unable to vote and the people who aren't here, but whose spirits and legacy of protest and of progress lives on in this community.
And you're going to go down in the history books. You and your election is etched in stone in the history books of time in American politics. And I just want to thank you from me personally and the rest of Amplify's team for the work that you're doing to continue to push for the legislation, the policies to give everyone access to that promise of America, and for opening the door for young brothers. I always say when President Obama was elected, we could see ourselves there in the White House, and sometimes our mayor is the only person we see, especially locally. So you are giving us another ring that we can imagine ourselves or see ourselves climbing on. So I thank you, brother, for everything you do and everything you represent. I do want to open it up for our viewing audience. We're about to start taking your questions. If you would put them in the chat and we'll get right to it. So our first question coming up. So, we got a Snoop Dogg one. So Joseph White says Snoop Dogg admitted for many years he was brainwashed into thinking that because of his past felonies, he couldn't vote. He is voting for the first time this year. How are you using your influence to make sure Black men with criminal backgrounds know their voting rights, Mr. Mayor?
Well, during my campaign, we worked with various voter registration organizations. Many of them focus on getting people with felonies their right to vote back. We also were very clear and intentional about sharing across all of our platforms that we had who could vote and who could not vote. Even some people with a felony can vote if it's not a crime of moral turpitude here in Alabama. So we wanted to make sure that people understood, what challenges they may have in voting and what opportunities they may have, and then really how to get those addressed. And working with a lot of organizations here, I think we were able to really communicate that. And now what we've been looking to do has been to look at, like Florida has done, to make sure all felons get their right to vote back, and working with some of our local legislators and our Black Caucus here at the state level. And I want to emphasize that because, again, much of the political progress that's being made is being made at the state level, because that's where the action is. So you got to know where your state capital is. You have to know who some of your advocates are, and you have to hold those state representatives accountable, because many of these laws are not local laws that we see. They are state and federal laws. And so if we can get a better understanding of how our state government works and start to influence that, then I think we can also see some better outcomes that impact us even on the local level.
I absolutely agree, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that. Next question here. So Ariel asks, what are 3 top actions we can take to support our returning brothers and sisters after periods of incarceration to become engaged, to use their voices and their vote?
Well, I think the first thing is we have to provide more services and more resources to help with their reentry. Often what you find is that when men and women are released from our prison system, they have a hard time finding some place to live, just finding, a way to get a house over their head. Then the second thing is, how can they, get a job if they still have to check a box? And what we've been pushing for years, and it's picked up some traction over the last couple of years, has been banning the box legislation, because it's important for people who are really trying to get back on their feet. And it's important for us who are trying to lower the recidivism rate, because we don't want to see that cycle back and forth of people getting out of prison, then getting back into a lifestyle that put them there in the first place, and seeing them back on the wrong track. And I think to the degree that we can help our local and state leaders provide some of these resources and work with organizations that are currently doing that in your own community, then those are important steps, in my opinion. The last thing I would certainly say as a policymaker is we want to make sure that we are giving everyone the opportunity, the fair opportunity, to get another chance once they have been released and they have paid their debt to society. That means we cannot continue to stigmatize them. We cannot continue to hold them back. And more importantly, we have to try to lift them up. And we have to do things at our level by making sure our partners in parole boards partnered with community organizations that are doing this work, and also making sure our faith-based community, as well as our governmental entities, are aware of what challenges may be existing so that we can provide help. And I say the faith-based community because many churches that I know about here in Montgomery have not only prison ministries, but they have ministries that are helping men and women and their families once they're released to get a roof over their head, to try to get a steady income, and then make sure that they can stay on the right road to recovery and do those things that are necessary to keep them from going back in the system.
And you bring the church. I get that a lot in this work. Churches asking how they can help in this work. I know you mentioned churches who can help with that transition, but what else can they do from your perspective, especially in tandem with local government, to help this demographic?
I don't think there's any question they can be advocates. Your pastors, your churches are foundations for campaigns. Outside of money, in particular in the Black community, and maybe even more so than money in the Black community, you better have some strong church support. And you can have all the social media, you can have all the likes you want, but if you want to know who votes, then you better be in some churches. And so there's power in that. There's leverage in that for those churches to then advocate to those very elected officials who are coming to them seeking their vote to push for their agenda. And it's very important that it be a two-way street and not just one way every couple of years or every 4 years that we see people. There should be conversations, and there should be, even a report card in terms of here are the things that we care about. Now, the second thing is beyond the policymaking side is going to be, again, pushing forward on initiatives that the church and the faith-based community may hear about, because often when people are in need, they turn to their neighborhood church. They turn to that nonprofit that they're familiar with. And out of that, you hear problems, you hear challenges, and the church can then, again, bring those things to the attention of organizations, of government in your community as things that need to be improved and things that need to be changed. And so I think there's an immense opportunity for churches to play an even larger role consistently in influencing policy and making sure that anyone who wants to come visit their church during election time is doing the work of those members in between those elections. And if that's the case, then I think you'll see more progress and more work getting done.
And you know what, Mr. Mayor, that's what we're finding. Like when we're talking to Black men and get them involved, because as you know, that's our target demographic. We're only primarily focused on Black men across the South. And one of the reasons why they're not voting, or folks, a portion of that group of folks, we're not voting, is because, we're not seeing change happen, right? And I've been guilty of this as a political organizer. When I first started, we would go into communities and say, hey, this election is the most pivotal election of our, right? And if you don't go out and vote, this won't happen. And it scares people, and then they go vote and then nothing changes. What can you say to that group of men who believe that my vote don't count because I haven't seen anything change where I used to before?
I would say that, any one vote can make or break an election. And, individually, a person may feel as though their vote is not having an impact. I think what we have to do is show them the collective impact that they can have. And I think that, sometimes we don't know what change looks like because we haven't been educated about the process. And we don't know how things got to where they were or how things can get to where we want them to be. And what we have to do is target those Black men who have given up on politics, who've given up on people bringing about change, and let them know that everything from their salary to their hourly wage to their healthcare policies and what happens in the hospitals, much less, again, courtrooms or anywhere else, is being dictated by those decision makers. And I would dare say to someone who says, I don't see change, then I would ask them, what type of change are they looking for? What do they want to see? And if they want to see that, how do they plan to make it happen without participating? You can complain when we think of this in a competition aspect about outcomes, but the only way to try to influence whether or not you win or lose is to compete. And that's what elections are. You have to compete with your ideas versus someone else's, and who you choose to support and who you think can make a difference. Whether you see that in a month or a week, that depends on probably what your agenda is. But if you're looking at overall change, I think we have to do a better job of sharing with those Black men things that have changed, progress that has been made, laws that have been passed, and make it relatable to them. At one time there was no inspections of workplace conditions, so people were put into various plants and industry, manufacturing facilities without any sense of safety, without any sense of how long a person could work, how many hours, did they have to be paid a fair wage? Those are things that just didn't magically appear. And so I think that for Black men, we have to share with them that these things came about through policy. They came about through change. Didn't happen in one meeting, didn't happen in maybe two, but it happened. No different than we think about how much someone is paid. There's been a lot of talk about a livable wage recently. It's $15 an hour, a livable wage. What do we need to do? Well, that's set by those at the federal level. That minimum wage is set at that level, but it's impacted and often adopted by private organizations and entities. And then I think for those Black men who feel like the system has let them down, elected officials have let them down, that's true. I think there has been some of that, and we have to acknowledge some of the shortcomings. But again, that doesn't mean you quit. And I think if we ask them, have they been let down in other phases of life or in other areas, they'll probably say, yeah, I've been let down over there too. Does that mean you quit? Does that mean you just gave up? Or did you come back and say, okay, I'm gonna give this another shot. I'm gonna try again. And I think what we have to share with those Black men is that without their participation, then we'll continue to see progress that they may not even appreciate, progress that they may not even know taken away. They'll continue to see their rights taken away, and they'll continue to see, brick by brick, the foundation that's been built over the last 50 years since the Voting Rights Act really impacted in a way that they probably can't imagine right now.
Thank you for that. You said everything I will hope you said and more. So we're right on it. We have another question that we're going to ask, and it comes from Mr. Aaron Harris. Thank you for your leadership. What do you think the strategy can be to increase participation, given that throughout the South, we see the necessary numbers on the books to change the outcome of elections?
I think as we talked about a little bit already, we have to make elections personal, and we have to make them relatable to Black men that we're trying to get involved. It may be one topic, it may be one issue. It doesn't have to be a white paper. It doesn't have to be a 10-point, memo. It may be a few things. We have to find out, what do Black men who are not voting want to see from the political process? What is it that drives them? And I think then help craft a narrative and an agenda around what some of those issues are. Is it prison reform? Is it economic opportunity? Is it racial discrimination? What is it that they're looking to see? And then I think we have to go to them and make sure they understand at the local, state, and national level how they can have an impact on those outcomes. And I think if we're able to listen first and then take away some of their ideas and some of the feedback and frustration that we get, and then use that to craft a different narrative about why it's important for them to participate, maybe we can see that inch up. When we think about change, and I was thinking about the previous question, you got the Affordable Care Act, just for instance. That has had a tremendous change, even for those states like ours that fought it tooth and nail. It has had a tremendous impact on access to healthcare. So if you're 22 years old, you're 25 years old, you may say, I could care less about healthcare. I'm in great health. I don't even have insurance. I've never been to the hospital, and that's fine. Well, maybe it's your daughter. Maybe it's your wife. Maybe it's your mother or your grandmother that does need that access. Your vote, along with those of others, may have an impact in terms of whether or not they have the opportunity to receive medical treatment or to have a certain type of medical procedure. Let's say that doesn't get them, that's fine. Then if you do have issues with the criminal justice system, and many of us do, then what is it you would like to see? What would you like to see done differently than how it's done right now? Well, if you've had a bad experience with it, then one way to have an impact is to collectively unite your voice and your vote in order to try to change that process. Mandatory minimums are a big issue for people across this country. The 3 strikes you're out rule, of course, we talked about that. Eliminating the disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. Those are just a few areas that we impacted through legislation and I think through advocacy over the last few years. So when we think about things, there's a lot of opportunity to make changes. There's a lot of opportunity to impact lives and outcomes. We just have to be able to draw a simple picture. Doesn't need to be 3D and complex. It just needs to be a simple picture of how Black men voting more and participating more can help shape and influence these outcomes. I think if we do that, then we can see gains in our participation among Black men, and I think we'll be able to see some changes in our electoral politics and thereby the policies that are produced from them.
You know what, Mr. Mayor, I've been doing this work, advocating and running campaigns for about a decade now. Even though Amplify Action is a 501c4 nonpartisan organization, you have a very strong connection and understanding of the community and who the group that we're reaching out to, Black men. Like I see that in every answer that you give. It's probably been the best interview, and I love everyone we interview, but this right now, you're giving us those gems. You're giving us that meat on the bone. Like you're giving us what we've been looking for in communicating with folks who watch this, these interviews and these lives, launch events that we've been doing. And I just thank you. Like this has been impactful. If you see my notes, I've been writing notes while you're talking because you're just hitting the nail on the head. And I understand why you were able to become the first Black mayor in Montgomery, Alabama, because you get it. And that's the beginning of everything that we're trying to accomplish here. Thank you. I think we have one last question. So again, no, we just asked that one from Mr. Aaron Harris. From our team here at Amplify Action, we're asking, help us grow our mission to change the economy between racial justice. Oh, nope, that's a statement, not a question. All right, Rashad Gaines, his question is, Mr. Mayor, how do we as a community of organizers, activists, and advocates encourage men and women to trust in a system that has worked against them for so long by voting? The people are tired of lip service. What is the 2020 message of hope and triumph? And I know you touched on part of this in one of your last answers, but I think this one goes deeper into, touching people where they are.
I'm reminded of the quote by Dr. King of the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And I think we have to keep in mind that progress is always an elusive goal. It's always a target that we're trying to get. And just as we think we're getting close, it moves a little bit. But that is the beauty of our history, in particular, that of Black men and women in this country through those ancestors, is that there have always been challenges, but we've always been able to overcome whatever those were. And I think if we believe that the election of the first Black president, or we believe the election of a Black mayor completes that progress, then we're wrong. What those flashpoints are, those are opportunities along the road of progress, right? And I think that for 2020, what we have to think about is, what do we want our future to be? When we think about the killing of George Floyd, and we think about the killing of many others by police and by the state itself, we have to think through what we want to come out of that, what we want to come out of the protest, out of the civil unrest. And so what I would hope for 2020 is that people who believe they've been fed lip service see this now as a call to action, see this as an opportunity that's right. You know, when we think about history, we forget that it was the murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson in Perry County, Alabama, that led to the Selma to Montgomery voting rights march. That is what got it started. There had been protests in Selma for years, Dallas County Voters League and many other groups that have been protesting, but that murder was a flashpoint and a point that really changed the movement at a time when, you know, there was some discussion or debate about where it should go post-March on Washington in 1963. So now we have another flashpoint, if you will, and a protest and there's unrest. What we have to do now is channel that emotion, channel that energy into positive change. And I think if we are able to view it from that perspective, that, you know what, I am tired of lip service. So now we're going to do something about it. Voting is just one of those things. It's not the only thing. And I'll never tell anyone it's the only thing, because after you vote, you still need to be active. You still need to be aware. You still need to be organized. And so for those of you that are community organizers, the election is one day. The work then begins the very next day, because after you choose to elect whoever it is, you have to make sure you hold them accountable. You have to make sure you have a plan. It cannot be that you expect them to come up with everything. Present your own agenda. Again, doesn't have to be 10 points. It can be 3, it can be 5, whatever it is, but you want to have some goals and objectives of what you want to see. And it has to be something that people can realistically do in their space. If those are judges, if that's your school board, if that's, you know, your county government, whatever it may be, those are things I believe community organizers and leaders must do, is to stay engaged, to make sure that you aren't just paid lip service, and to make sure that you are asking tough questions during the time of vetting your candidate and who you're going to vote for. And I think what we've seen over the last few weeks is that people have decided they're not just going to wait on political leaders. They're not just going to wait on elected officials. They're going to take their frustration. They're going to take their energy to the streets and let people know exactly what it is they want to see done. And they want to see these wealth gaps, these healthcare gaps, these education gaps closed, and they want to see decisive action and policies that reflect that. And that is something I think right now, particularly in this moment, that you can make sure as a community organizer, as a leader, that you're doing. Attend a city council meeting, go to a school board meeting, go to a county commission meeting. You don't have to go to every one. Check them out online. They're all posted now. You need to make sure you understand what government can do and what government won't do. And then if you're able to do that and inform and educate yourself a little better, then you'll be able to do that throughout your community. And that will help you drive change in whatever area you want to see it done. Because the participation is something that we lose after the elections. And I can't stress that enough, that you have to stay vigilant in terms of your government at the local, state, and national level, and make sure you have an agenda at all levels of government in the various branches, and to make sure that you're keeping up with whether or not it is being executed or not. And if it's not, then you make sure those people understand that you will hold them accountable if they don't do a better job. That's how you get from lip service to action. And that's how you get outcomes that Black men in the South and Black men across this country can really start to have confidence in the system more if we're doing our part, both on the community side and on the elected side.
You know what? Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. That was our last question, but I just want to say, you know, you just mentioned a lot of stuff that's just sparking ideas in my head, but there are events in our lives and in our country that spark change. And one of the things that we're seeking to do here at Amplify is not just spark the change here and there, but The change has been sparked. Now it's time to spread the flames. And that's what you're talking about. And I really appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who's been on. If we didn't get to your questions today, it's fine. Keep your questions going. We're going to answer them throughout this live and even offline. But I want to make sure that I call everyone to action, because it takes action to get things done. So we're just asking for 3 simple things. One, we need you, if you're watching now, go to our website and sign up. Sign up to join us in this work, because we can't do it alone. You know, there's a proverb that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. And this is about us working together and running together to make that change happen. Also, you know, because we're targeting a demographic that folks typically don't target. There's no information out there or research about Black men and their voting habits that we've been able to readily, you know, identify and get access to. Everything we're doing is basically being built from the ground up. So we need your donations. There's a link in the comments right now that you can click to make a donation today. We'll greatly appreciate it. And the last thing I'm asking is for y'all to follow us on social media. We're everywhere at Amp Our Vote is our tag there. But also, once you like us, share it with 5 of your friends. Help us amplify our message. Mr. Mayor, thank you, thank you, thank you. At my church, we say we thank you once, we thank you twice, we thank you in the name of Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for being here. And I personally would love to, and our team, to continue the conversation with you. You have so much wisdom and knowledge, and we would greatly appreciate your support in our efforts in this work.
Yes, sir. I look forward to it. Look forward to staying in touch and being a partner with you guys and making sure we do everything we can, not only to increase voter participation for election, but voter activation after the election as well. And that's what we need in this process of more Black men to be involved, to take their frustration to the ballot box, and then take their frustrations to the public meetings and let us know in our capacities what needs to be done and how we can get it done, and work with organizations like yours and community organizers and leaders all across the South to do everything we can to really change things and to really change outcomes. So I look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. You have a blessed day, man. Talk to you soon.
Thank
you. So, I'm about to bring my good friend Rashad Gaines back up here so we can share a little bit with y'all. Man, Rashad, what? I am excited. That was awesome.
It was pretty dope. It was pretty dope. We didn't get to ask him like the real.
And Jamar said this before.
Say it again.
We didn't ask.
I was gonna say we didn't get to ask Stephen the real questions. Who has the best fried chicken in Alabama? That's the real question that we needed to get to. Look, man, we from Carolina, we know good food, but them Bamas in Bama, they gets down. Okay, the whole state got good food. Alabama, they cook so good in Alabama. The white people know how to fry chicken good. Okay, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Hey, the mayor, awesome. I'm looking to follow.